Well, hello everyone. I'm John Laughland, the Director of Forum for Democracy International, speaking to you this week from Paris. Welcome to this week's forum. I'm delighted to welcome Jeremy Nell, who joins us from Cape Town, and my old friend and colleague, Professor Édouard Husson, who's our main guest for today. Professor Husson has been a regular contributor to the forum when we were still an X-Space. In audio format. This is the first time we've got you, Édouard, on video, which is wonderful. Édouard Husson is a professor of history and a prolific author and a commentator on political affairs. In particular, he is one of the editors of Le Courrier des Stratèges, a French publication which comments on national and international politics. And he's kindly agreed to speak to us today about his concept of grey fascism. Grey fascism is the way that Édouard Husson characterizes the regime that we live under. We've had a number of editions of the forum on aspects of the regime. We had Craig Murray last week. We had Micah Gosch a couple of weeks ago talking about the attack on free speech, particularly concerning Compact Magazine in Germany. But of course, it's a phenomenon that goes unfortunately all over Europe and indeed all over the world. But and it's quite common, I think, now for people to say that they live under a totalitarian regime. But I'm very struck, Édouard, by your use of the word fascism. Firstly, because it's a commonplace, isn't it? The word fascism is used all the time, at least as an insult. But you don't use it so much as an insult as instead as a tool of analysis. And the fact that you use it as a tool of analysis and you mean what you say, in other words, it's not just an insult, but is the analysis of a historian and a political commentator. The fact that you do this is all the more remarkable because you are, in fact, an expert on fascism, or at least on Nazism, fascism in its German form. You've written many books about Nazism. It was your thesis and your special subject as a professor, the history of Germany in general, but specifically the history of the Nazi period. So perhaps you could explain to us, Édouard, why you've decided to call the regime we live under grey fascism, and is it really credible? I mean, this is such an overworked comparison, isn't it? Everybody is always comparing current events with the 1930s in Germany and so on. How credible is it to say that the regime really is fascist, Édouard?
Yeah. Yes, thank you, John. First, thank you for mentioning the fact that I am a specialist, an academic specialist in the history of National Socialism, of Nazism. I wrote my PhD and then my habilitation thesis on Nazism. And the second aspect I would like to mention is the fact that I hesitated before mentioning the before using. Sorry, I'm interrupted for 2 minutes. I'm using this concept. It's because, as you said, it has been used a lot of times and in a very political argumentation. And it has been used by the left and as a kind of political insult. So I hesitated before using that, but as I would try to show, it's something like a tool of analysis which can be used just because it exactly describes what is at stake. And what is at stake is the way our freedoms are being suppressed by the state, and by the state who, in a very characteristic manner, is working together with a part of the capitalist system of the corporations. So that's That's why I use it. I can be more specific if you want.
Would you mind actually specifying what you mean by grey fascism? I mean, I think I have a general
Yes. So
understanding of it. It's sort of like where it's more subversive. It's more subtle. Is that correct?
yes. Let's use the concept of totalitarianism first. It is not only a political concept. It is also an academic concept. It had been codified by scholars, and we know approximately what it means. That when we compare the fascist regime of the interwar periods with the communist regimes, we see a lot of common features: censorship, centralization of politics with a one-party system, total control of the individuals, as Robert Lai, the well-known National Socialist, said. We want to control even the way the people are dreaming. So this is something which is obvious. But then we have to try comparisons, and I think that if we try these comparisons, we will know that today you have different kind of totalitarianisms. You have, for instance, let's say, a very strong totalitarian temptation in China, with Xi Jinping and with his system. This we could see during the COVID episode. But then you can identify it as a way to renew the old communist way of domination. What is striking me in the case of the Western system is it has its own characteristics. And if I'm more specific, I would say that I'm very much struck by the fact that you have a strong collaboration of the state with part of the capitalist system of the big corporations. You have let's say what has been called surveillance capitalism, big tech. You also have the pharma industry. You have a lot of sectors where you think this is not just this is the contrary of contemporary China. In China, the state has been absorbing everything, and the state is an important economic actor until now. In the case I'm mentioning, it's more that part of the public sector has been privatized in the West. So then you have also I would say something which is very important in my eyes, which is the fact that nobody is directly compelled to do something. This is what they have called in the US the nudge system. Is that you are brought slowly to the point where the government says, well, now it's okay, you are a good citizen, and so on. So this is not the classical coercion of communism. This is not totalitarianism as we would use it as a concept, but this is something which is, in my eyes, specifically Western, which is the system we find in Western Europe and in North America, and it belongs also to the system that you have what I call a system of forever wars. But these are not total wars. These are partially theatrical wars. A war is not waged to be won. It's a wage because it allows the system to enforce its coercion on people, and to for the.
You've also understand,
it has an internal function, and well, let me be more specific about France. I had the idea of this concept when I looked at Emmanuel Macron on July 12, 2021, when he announced that people would have to accept the vaccination against the COVID. and it was very specific because he had been explaining to us that we were at war during the COVID. It was his favorite expression. We are at war, and well, I mean, only fascists will speak of war the whole time, and they will speak about war when it's not about war, but when it's about something else. And then he didn't say it was compulsory. He said, I expect from loyal citizens that they get vaccinated. And then a few months later, he had this extraordinary explanation in a paper interview where he said, well, you know, what I don't like, what I dislike among the so-called anti-vaxxers is the fact that they are not loyal to the national community. And this is a typically, for me as a scholar, this is a typically fascist expression. They are not loyal to the community. And for this reason, they cannot be considered as citizens any longer. Well,
Édouard,
excuse me.
Let me ask you, I'm not sure if you can hear me. Let me ask you, you've
Yes.
explained the grey part in the sense of it being slightly undefined, less clear perhaps than other previous forms of fascism. But as I understand you, you also give to the word grey two other meanings, which are very, very original. Perhaps you'd like to explain.
Yes, the first meaning is that I'm speaking about fascism, and what we think is fascism is rather a system existing in a young society with people enthusiastic to wage war against other nations, perhaps to exterminate other nations, and so on. This was, let's say, the case of Nazi Germany, but. I say grey because, you know, in French, we say the grey power about the fact that the older generations are ruling on every aspect of our life. So people with gray hair. And I think this is characteristic that this fascism is a product of what I see as a rule of the older generations. It's not of the younger generation. If you have a look at the politics in all European countries, people have less and less children, and they don't care about the expectations of the younger generations. Just have a look at how children and teenagers were treated during the COVID episode. Nobody cared about their feelings, the lockdowns, what the consequences, the fact that they didn't have a school otherwise than schooling otherwise than online, and so on. So, and I think this is typical. This is a fascism for all people. For all people who want to defend their privileges and who can live with the fact that their state is waging war against other countries, if possible, wars that you can win, but they don't care about that. And it was for me very characteristic that a few months after the COVID episode, then came the war in Ukraine, and the war in Ukraine is very characteristic of what I consider as fascism. If you because this is a proxy war, and this is a war waged by people who have developed a real nostalgia of what happened in the 1930s or 1940s. You have fascist militias in Ukraine, and so it's you know what I'm mentioning. Yes.
Sorry, I interrupted you. You were reminding me now of something that Aldous Huxley wrote about in Brave New World, where he said that when the citizens become so compliant and complacent that they become good citizens, that there isn't a need for overt totalitarianism anymore. That's kind of what you were getting at.
Yes, exactly. You know, I discovered this reality when I studied Nazi Germany. The level of political coercion exerted on the German citizens was much less than what happened in communist regimes. And if you just perhaps you know this well-known book by the American historian Christopher Browning. It's called Ordinary Men, and he's describing it's a police battalion in northern Germany, and they are brought to Poland, and they were not informed about the fact that they would be killing Jews, but they accept their task. And after that, they get accustomed to the fact of killing people, and at the end, some of them are even happy about what they do, and all are justifying what they do. And well, this is an extreme example, but just think at the way we could accept that our government tells us you have to be vaccinated and you have no choice. You will take this or that vaccine by this or that company. This is not a free market at all. It's for instance, in my case, I would have accepted to take the Chinese vaccine because this was a classical vaccine. I would have perhaps accepted it, but I didn't get vaccinated because I had no trust in the vaccine proposed by Pfizer, Moderna, and the others. But I had no choice. So because I didn't want to be vaccinated, I had to be tested the whole time, to take the train, to get in public places, and I was considered by my own president as a non-citizen for a few months. And if you think what it means, then if you apply it to every field in public life, in social life, at the end, there is a high degree of accommodation, and people are suddenly there where they didn't expect to be.
Well, it is, of course, applied, isn't it, to the whole of life? Because as we saw from the debate last night between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, and as we see almost every day, many times a day, the extreme center, which governs all the Western countries, regards any rivals or any threats to its hegemony as beyond the citizenship, in the sense that they are said to be a threat to democracy and so on. So you're absolutely right to say that it doesn't just.
And if I may come back to the history of ideologies, why am I using the concept of fascism? Because I mean also historical fascism. If you remember who Benito Mussolini was. Everybody would tell you now he was the ally of Adolf Hitler, and it brought him to the final catastrophe. But just remember, he was coming from the left. He was somebody very much respected before World War I. He was even depicted sometimes as the Lenin of Italy, and Lenin was praised at that time as a shrewd political leader. And then he became, during the first year of the war, he became a nationalist, and he was very proud to defend his country, but he was still a socialist. And then he, after the war, he got acquainted with the bosses of big companies, and he became friend with them. And then he invented this very strange mixture. Try to define fascism. It's neither left nor right. It's neither extreme left nor extreme right. It's both of them, but it's also the extreme center in many aspects. And just look at his economics in the 1920s. He was a kind of what we would call neoliberal today. And then in the 1930s, he was more defending the intervention of the state. But this guy had no real belief in this or that economic doctrine. He was just an opportunist. So it makes possible the fact that today you can imagine the fact that the fascism is coming from the center.
Yes,
and it's an ideology of the center. It was an ideology of the left of the origin. It became an ideology of the right through an alliance with conservatives. But today it's an ideology of the center.
Well, this, of course, as you know, as well as I do, probably better, is also the theory of one of our other French colleagues, Fabrice Boutillon, who talks about the unification of extremes. So either by indeed being centrist, or by combining, as you've just said, elements of extreme left and extreme right. But Édouard, I want to press you on the third meaning of grey, because that in a way is the most fascinating, and I'm sure it'll be the most interesting to our viewers and listeners.
Yes, and well, I mean, John, you are a scholar yourself, and you know, when suddenly you are exploring a concept, and suddenly you think, well, that's it, and suddenly you have a further step where you think, well, oh, I didn't think about this aspect, but it's really interesting. So suddenly I was thinking about the paradox that fascism in the 1930s, if I want to use it compared to now in the 1930s, this was a system deploying itself in rather conservative societies as far as personal ethics, family ethics was concerned, and so on. We can come back to that later, but nevertheless, and suddenly I thought, how can you think about what is happening today? And suddenly I thought, 50 nuances of grey. But I thought, well, it's very interesting because it says a lot about what happened, and it's many of these free marketers of the 1980s now they are so much in favor of the state in economics. But I would mean many of these people wanting to revolutionize to destroy the family, to have a free life, to have a totally individualistic, hedonistic way of life. Now, what is their favorite kind of sexuality? It's sadism, or it's sadomasochism. So it's and this is what is depicted in the trilogy of 50 Nuances of Grey, and the hero is called Christian Grey.
Yeah.
But what he's having a contract with this young woman, but it's not a stable one. When he wants to revise it, he revises it, and she gives her consent. So I found it fascinating, and at the end, I thought, well, my concept of Grey Fascism is perhaps still more far-reaching than I thought.
Yeah. So you're saying then, Édouard, that the regime is characterized by a sort of indifferentiation. That's the first meaning of grey. It's in grey suits. It's partly anonymous. That's the first meaning. The second meaning is the generational one, grey old men with grey hair. And the third one is that it is a form of sadism, or at least that it uses sadism or practices sadism. And in fact, I was struck yesterday. I sent you a message about it. The double announcement yesterday in Britain of cutting a fuel allowance for pensioners. The British government has taken away a few £100s, which was given to pensioners to pay for their heating bills in winter, which is a kind of gratuitously sadistic measure to take, because I can't imagine that the budget of the United Kingdom is crippled by such a small social allocation. And on the same day, the British government announced that it was releasing thousands of violent criminals back into society, people who have murdered, raped, and gangsters and so on. And these two announcements, I sent you a message about it.
I saw that, yeah.
Seem to me to corroborate what you say, that actually there is indeed, quite apart from their private, we can only speculate what their private sexual predilections are, but the idea that the regime itself enjoys in some way sort of torturing the electorate is very, very absorbing.
Yes, and I think that what is very striking is, well, it's fashionable to mention Marquis de Sade as somebody having contributed to the freedom of French people in the 18th century and so on. But the reality is, when you read Sade, if half of the novels, of the books, is busy with philosophical considerations, and when you read it, he's trying to justify the fact that you would be allowed in your freedom, and if you are somebody who is really free, you may kill other people for reasons of sexual pleasure. And at the end, if you do that, it's because you belong to a superior people, to a superior class or superior group. And I think nobody noticed the fact that the first thinker of fascism in some way was the Marquis de Sade. So I think my explanation is coherent.
And what about the differences then? Because after all, there are surely differences. I mean, we look at, I don't know, Mussolini. We look at the militarism, the fact that obviously you've said that our contemporary regimes have forever wars, and that's quite right. But on the other hand, there isn't a cult of militarism, at least not as overtly as there was in Italian fascism or in Nazi Germany. And I'm also wondering about the cult of youth, because you say that it's a grey fascism. In the sense of a fascism of older people, of retired people.
Yes.
Is that, I mean, do we have a cult of youth today? We still do have a cult of youth, actually. How do you see the comparison there? Are there different? There are surely differences as well between historical fascist regimes and today.
Yes, I think this is always the limit of developing a concept in social sciences. You cannot put everything in your concept, or it becomes a system, and it can be dangerous. But nevertheless, let me start with well-known German philosopher Martin Heidegger. At the end of the war, he wrote in his private papers, and then he defended after the war the idea that Hitler had failed. And why did he fail? It's very astonishing when you read Heidegger. He says, well, he wasn't up to the task of National Socialism. He wasn't shrewd enough, balanced enough, and so on. But we have to wait for the rebirth of the better National Socialism. I was very struck about that, because if you have a look at what is happening today, you could say, well, if you take my concept of fascism seriously, then of grey fascism, then, well, maybe that's the better fascism that Heidegger had in mind. I didn't insist on another aspect which is striking, is the obsession with environment, with nature, with rescuing the planet, with climate change and so on, and also the obsession with demographics. The idea that many of these people have, that there are too many human beings on Earth, that is not good for the balance and of the planet and so on. And these were aspects you had in Nazism, quite clearly. If you take the concept of the so-called Lebensraum, the space, living space for the superior Germans or Nordic people, then it's obvious that one of the key aspects was that there are too many people living in Eastern Europe. We have to get rid of them, because we have to install our German farmers and our German industrialists there. And if you have a look at the way the West behaved in the last, and I would say above all the liberal West, I recommend this book by Jonah Goldberg, Liberal Fascism. very interesting, and it was one of the books that brought me to the idea we are discussing. But if you have a look at it, then it's obvious that the West has been obsessed by the overpopulation, by the fact that there were too many people on Earth, and has been implementing demographic politics, the whole family planning, so-called family planning, and so on, and the idea that abortion was a tool for regulating the population. Let's be specific about that. Many people say, well, Hitler was forbidding abortion for German women, but he was encouraging it for other people. It was encouraging the so-called inferior people in Eastern Europe. And if you have a look at what is happening, the number of abortions encouraged by the West system is much higher in the so-called third world as it has been in the Western world. Where it is allowed for hedonistic views. So I think that if we go further, we can defend the use of the concept of Grey Fascism. It doesn't mean that I would include everything. I mean, there is a paradox, because the first fascism was in many aspects racist. And today, what I call Grey Fascism is rather obsessed with anti-racism. But the way it is obsessed by anti-racism, I think, is no an inversion, because it is obsessed also with the fact that racism was a characteristic of the initial fascism. But if you listen to what they are saying, they are also criticizing the fact that racism failed. It's not that it was ethically reprehensible; it was that it failed.
And I think
Edouard,
go ahead, John.
Do you think that grey fascism is more dangerous than overt totalitarianism? I'm thinking of, for example, North Korea, and what we know about it. It seems fairly obvious in terms of what's going on. We know what to expect. The citizens know what to expect. There doesn't seem to be any, excuse the pun, grey areas.
Yes, I wouldn't try to say that one totalitarianism is less tragic than another one. I mean, what is happening in former in some former communist countries, or countries that are still communist. I mean, we all know that. What I try to identify is what is characteristic of the West. And if we try to understand why our democracies are failing, because the starting point was a democratic regime, and today it's not democratic any longer, but it seems to be democratic, and this is one of the characteristics of fascism. I think is that fascism was born in parliamentarian or democratic states.
And what about the issue of nationalism, Édouard? Because again, people listening to us, I'm sure, will have a good deal of sympathy with what you've said. Well, I mean, I can't speak for them, but I imagine some people will. But even people who are sympathetic will say, well, fascism was nonetheless nationalistic. You've just reminded us that Mussolini was pro-war because he wanted to. He broke with his pacifist socialist friends in the Italian Socialist Party precisely because he was pro-war, just as we might say in the Labour Party or on the French left, and obviously on the American left, the pro-war faction has won out. But would you say that grey fascism? How do you resolve the apparent contradiction between the obvious nationalistic elements of historic fascism and today's regime?
Yes, but I'm a historian, so I don't believe in essential fascism. I think that there has been an evolution. So my view is rather that if you have a closer look at what fascism was, just listen to Mussolini. He was very fond of ancient Rome, and it was an empire. And his idea was to rebuild the ancient empire around the Mediterranean space. So I think that if you read, for instance, the fascinating conversations between Hitler and Hermann Rauschning, where Hitler says so much about what he really believes in, his nihilism and so on. He says nations, they will be soon outdated. We are building something else. We are going beyond nations. And in his view, beyond nations meant the Nordic race and a kind of supranational European state where the Germans would be the core, but not because they were the Germans as a nation, but because they were the most Nordic people. So I don't think that you can stop fascism as a reality. You can focus only, on the fact that fascism was nationalist for a while. It was, but for Mussolini or for Hitler, it was just a step towards another step of evolution, of political evolution.
Yeah, I mean, we
Édouard,
see that,
do we?
Sorry,
Go on.
But we see that in America as well, because America is a intensely nationalistic country. The flag, the commander-in-chief, America's the greatest. The nationalist discourse is extremely strong. But as you've just said, Édouard, for Mussolini and for Hitler, the American nation is regarded as exceptional and therefore as having an international role. So American nationalism ultimately is also internationalist, because the Americans regard themselves as the greatest nation on earth and therefore a nation which everyone else should emulate. Jerm, go ahead.
There we go. I was just wondering, Édouard, we were talking earlier about the difficulty in defining grey fascism, and we kind of get a sense of what it is. We can kind of see it, but we sometimes don't know if it is. Do we not perhaps risk falling into the trap of then everything being grey fascism?
No, I don't think so. I was cautious, because I'm exploring my concept, and perhaps too cautious because I think I have to convince you and to be nuanced in some way. But nevertheless, I think it's important to say this is a characteristic of the so-called Western system. This is what is happening with Western democracies. I could speak at length about Macron and telling you he's a good example of grey fascism. I started with that my exposé, but just look at what is happening in the UK with censorship and with people being jailed because just because they said something which was politically incorrect on social networks and so on. I think that what is grey fascism means also that we have to do with the ultimate step or with a very advanced step of what fascism was at its core. And then I would bring you back to the book of Jonah Goldberg, this American essayist. His book is called Liberal Fascism, and he's not trying to say that fascism is only the contemporary fascism or liberalism, authoritarian liberalism is only the child of European fascism. He said it was born also in the US. There were many aspects in progressivism, in the cult of the state, in the way Wilson brought Americans into a war they didn't wish to have against Germany and so on. It was already something very very fascist in its core, and he has good arguments for that. So I think that we can identify something which is typically Western, I would say, North American and West European.
And then we have to, I think we can't have a discussion about fascism and the comparison with today without raising the Jewish question. Obviously, Nazism is remembered today almost exclusively for its anti-Semitism. People forget other very important aspects of Nazism. They forget in particular the German-Russian war, as you and I have said many times, Édouard, and they only remember the concentration camps. But again, how does that fit into the comparison? Surely it's a bit like with nationalism, internationalism. Isn't that a very, very substantial difference?
Well, you know, if we try to understand why National Socialism was so much focused on anti-Semitism, I think it was above all hatred of the Jews, and Hitler said that hatred of the Jews because they had invented a moral code and ethics for Europe that was bad for Europe, because if you are forbidden to kill your neighbor, if you are forbidden to kill people in other countries, then you won't be somebody able to conquer and to exert your will to power. So I think this was the original thinking of Hitler. It was, and he was, by the way, he was hating Christianity the same way he was hating Jews. Only that he was a tactician, and he thought, I need the German Christians, the German Catholics first and Protestants first to wage war against other European countries. After the war, after the victory, I will get rid of them. So. But you know, I think that the way anti-Semitism was given as the core value of the post World War II, while that anti-Semitism should be forbidden, and that it's the most terrible aspect you have to fight politically. I think this was not really an understanding of what had been at stake during World War II. As you said, well, they were hating Jews, but they were also hating the Poles, the Russians, the so-called Slavic people. They were hating the Christians and so on. So, and I would say you have two ways to interpret that. You can say either that, as many people say today, you have to be on the side of the Jews just because they were persecuted by Adolf Hitler. Or you can say you must forbid any genocide to be committed. And it should not be forbidden to say that what is happening in Gaza today has striking points of a genocide. So I think that you are right, but remember that how Mussolini evolved. Mussolini was very philo-Semitic in many aspects, and until 1936, and then because he thought this was politically important, he became anti-Semitic, without being very much convinced himself, without getting the support of the Italians for that. But then in this case, I would rather use the Italian fascism as the main comparison.
Édouard, I've just been thinking while you've been talking, and it struck me that every democratic country in the West seems to slip into grey fascism. Is that a correlation that you might consider accurate?
Yes, I think so. I think that I mean what Mussolini and Hitler were unable to achieve, the fact that the whole of Europe, for instance, would become fascist, in some way, it has been sadly a political evolution of the last 20 years. This would be how I see that. I see some exceptions. I mean, I wouldn't characterize. On the contrary, I think that some very conservative country for the criteria of Western Europe are the countries which are characteristically anti-fascist, like Hungary, for instance.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the point of greatest comparison, isn't it? Because it's goes back to what we were saying 10 or 15 minutes ago about the left and the right. Fascism's roots are essentially on the left, definitely for Mussolini, to a large extent also for Hitler. And what we observe in today's regimes is that they are, for the most part, the worst ones, both in Europe and America, they are essentially on the left. They have come from the left. It's the whole story of the neocons in America, but in Europe we have the same thing. Emmanuel Macron obviously coming from the left, Tony Blair and Keir Starmer coming from the left, all of them intensely pro-war. It's a left or soft centre left with or Baerbock, obviously, in Germany, again another example. There are so many examples of this trend, this blending of left and right, or what is called left and right. Surely that is the absolute. You say you don't believe in essences, but if there is an essence to fascism, surely that's it.
Yes, certainly you are perfectly right, John. And I think that let's say I will think further about that. But my first reaction to what you are saying is fascism always starts on the left. And then it can include some aspects of let's say right-wing ideology, but at the end it will try to rally everybody in the center. And you know the way Hitler or Mussolini said they were the third way between capitalism and socialism. But
Emmanuel Macron only 2 or 3 days ago, said exactly the same thing, talking about artificial intelligence. He went into one of his trances. He became so fascinated by his own intelligence and by the beauty of his own words that his eyes sort of started to glaze, and he went into a trance as he explained, like some oracle, that in America, artificial intelligence was entirely private, and in China, artificial intelligence was entirely controlled by the government. But in Europe, there would be a third way. So he literally
yes, you're right. You're right.
Yeah. But history repeats itself. The first time as tragedy, the second time as farce. Notwithstanding what Heidegger said, it doesn't look very promising right now. I mean, Italian fascism and German Nazism led to defeat, total defeat in the case of Germany. I'm not sure that the outlook is particularly positive. I mean, I have in mind Jerem's question a moment ago, where he said, is this not more effective? I don't know. It doesn't look terribly effective. It looks like I mean, Elon Musk well, at least I saw it today, has pointed out that the interest payments on the American debt are $1 trillion a year. They are the same as the budget for the military-industrial complex. Now, that's clearly not sustainable. It might seem like a technical point to finish on, but what's your feeling? I don't want you to look into a crystal ball, but is this new grey fascism going to be more effective, or is it going to have the same result as it had in 1945?
Well, you know, I think that at the end it will fail. But my concern is how long it will be until it fails, and what it will mean for us. Because I think the more it will fail in external wars, and we see that in Ukraine, the more dangerous it will become for us as citizens living in Western European countries or in North America. And I think that there will be a kind of compensation, internal coercion. They fail externally, so they will try to dominate more their own society, and that's what makes this system very, very dangerous for us. I think. If I may come back to the comparison with Italy and Germany, I think that there is a major difference between Mussolini and Hitler. Is that Hitler really believed in his own system, and he drove it until the terrible end we know. And it meant total self-destruction for Germany. It could have even been worse if some of the people there hadn't decided not to obey, not to apply what Hitler had given as orders. But there was a difference that Mussolini he was never 100% believing in what he was saying, and I think it's very characteristic of our Western countries and of North America and European. Western Europe and Central Europe in some way. These countries are really ruled by people who, at the end, this is a theater. They're on the stage. Look at Macron.
Yeah,
he was a bad actor at school, but he's enjoying, as you said, delivering these very long speeches. And well, it's a nightmare if we were forced to listen to them every day, as was the case in communist countries with I don't know, Castro or others. It's a nightmare. But I think that they really there is a kind of political theater. Which is very dangerous because these people don't believe in anything, and they are ready to everything. That's what that's my concern.
I've got one quick question. I know we are coming in for a landing, Edouard, but you were talking about Western countries. Now, as you know, I live in Africa. Why? And I don't know the answer, but so that's why I'm asking. But why do you think Africa seems to be somewhat immune to grey fascism to the degree that we're seeing in the West?
I think then we would have to think as historians. I think that fascism is typical for societies having reached a certain stage of development, a long history, and let's say fascist societies are emerging in industrial countries. I think that in many aspects, African countries are only at the start of their development, are building their own political entities and so on. This is one aspect. I think there was something very characteristic about communist regimes with this idea that they would have to build very quickly an industrial power to compete with the old Western system and so on. Let's think about Stalin or Mao. But you have other kind of totalitarianisms, for instance, in Islamic countries. They had their own kind of totalitarianism. So in many aspects, Iran today is a post-totalitarian society, but you wouldn't compare their system with what happened in fascist Europe in the interwar or with Stalinism. This was another system. So I think that it brings me back to the point I've been defending from the start, is that I try to identify a concept fitting for our West European and North American societies, if they are to be considered as an ensemble.
I just want to ask one last question. We've literally only got a few more minutes. What about the cult of the leader? Again, that's obviously surely a determining characteristic of historical fascism, particularly in the German case, but also in the Italian case. We don't really have that, do we, in our Western European American societies?
So it will be the last chapter in my book. The paradox that this cult of the leader was a cult of the individual, of the it was a kind of individualism focused on one person. And I would say that in our grey fascist societies, everyone can become a small dictator, you know, in his surrounding. And just look at the way our children are considered. You wouldn't consider the fact that they are children, but you would allow them to behave the way they like if you have children. So I have to explore that, but that will be my last chapter in the book.
Very good. Well, listen, Édouard, thank you so much. And well done for doing the broadcast in the street, because we can see that you're outdoors and with your phone.
I'm really sorry, but I had delay with different meetings, and I thought everything will fail if I try to reach my home. So I tried to do it this way. I hope it wasn't too noisy.
Not at all. We didn't hear any background noise at all. Édouard Husson, Professor Édouard Husson, thank you very much indeed for your time. Thank you to our listeners and our viewers. And we look forward to welcoming you next week at the same time, when we'll be talking about the World Health Organization. And we will be listening to an internal whistleblower who will tell us what that organization is all about. Thank you all. Thank you, Édouard. Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Thank you all.
Next week.
Bye. Bye.